Today, we're diving into a creature that haunts both old Gothic novels and maybe your modern life, the Psychic Vampire. Now, this isn't your typical monster that feeds on blood. No, this one feeds on something way more personal, your emotional energy.
I mean, really think about it. You hang up the phone or you walk away from a chat and you just feel wiped out, even though nothing really strenuous happened, right? Well, that feeling is at the very heart of what we're talking about today. So let's put a name to it, a psychic vampire. You might also hear him called an emotional or energy vampire, is basically anyone who leaves you feeling completely and totally drained. And while the idea might sound like something out of a horror movie, it's become a really powerful way to talk about some very real human interactions.
To really get how this idea got lodged in our brains, we've got to go back in time. Let's take a look at where this very different, very strange kind of vampire first showed up on the page.
Okay, so picture this. The year is 1897. Everyone remembers this as the year Bram Stoker gave the world Count Dracula. But what most people don't know is that just a few months later, another author, Florence Marryat, introduced a completely different and, you could argue, a much more sneaky kind of monster.
So let me introduce you to Harriet Brant. She's the main character of Marryat's novel, and she's pretty much the original psychic vampire in literature. Now, Harriet has no fangs, no thirst for blood. Instead, she just unintentionally drains the very life force out of everyone she gets close to. It's this tragic power that she has, and at first rears its ugly head with the absolutely devastating death of a baby she's nursing.
And this creates such a fascinating split, right? On one hand, you've got Dracula. He's ancient, he's evil, a pure predator hunting for blood. But then you have Harriet. She's a sympathetic character, almost cursed, and her danger just lies in her being there. She drains life itself, which honestly makes her a way more subtle and psychological kind of threat.
So from these tragic, kind of Gothic roots, the idea of an energy-draining vampire didn't just fade away. Oh no, it mutated, and it found a new, surprisingly funny and all too relatable home in modern pop culture.
And the perfect modern example is Colin Robinson from the show What We Do in the Shadows. He doesn't need a creepy castle. His hunting ground is the office. He literally feeds by boring his coworkers with these mind-numbing stories, picking petty arguments, and trolling people on the internet. He's the living, breathing embodiment of every painfully dull meeting you've ever had to sit through.
But here's where we make the big turn. This whole concept isn't just about fiction. We're about to shift from a monster in a story to a dynamic that psychologists deal with every single day, moving from simple annoyance to, in some cases, outright abuse.
You see, psychologists have actually adopted the term psychic vampire, not because they believe in literal creatures, of course, but as a really powerful metaphor to describe real and often deeply damaging toxic relationships.
The behavior of an emotional vampire is often linked in psychological literature to personality disorders, especially narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. And the key traits to know here are a deep, profound lack of empathy and this bottomless pit of a need for admiration. That whole combination really sets the stage for a draining dynamic.
One of the most studied and honestly most heartbreaking examples is the narcissistic parent. In this kind of dynamic, the parent doesn't really see their child as a separate person, but more like an extension of themselves. They basically become a parasite, constantly demanding emotional energy and support without ever giving anything back. This leaves the child feeling empty and just riddled with self-doubt.
And the fallout from this is just huge. When one person in a family demands all the emotional oxygen in the room, it forces everyone else into these unhealthy roles just to cope. You know, the scapegoat, the hero, the lost child. The entire family system gets warped and twisted all around the needs of that one individual.
Psychologists have even identified different species of these emotional vampires based on how they operate. You've got the egomaniac, who uses your vulnerabilities against you, the melodramatic, who just lives for crises. There's the constant victim, who dodges all responsibility, and of course, the criticizer, who builds themselves up by tearing you down. Do any of those sound familiar?
So now that we can kind of spot the different types, let's talk about the damage. This isn't just about feeling a little tired after a phone call. The impact of these interactions is tangible, it's real, and it's well documented.
And look, the impact isn't just in your head. People report very real physical and emotional symptoms after these encounters. Heart palpitations, headaches, chronic fatigue, and just a sudden, complete nosedive in their mood. It's your body's alarm system, telling you that your energy has just been siphoned off.
So how in the world do they do it? This quote is the key. The core tactic is emotional provocation. They push your buttons, they stir up your anger or your guilt or your insecurity, and in that moment when you're emotionally off balance, that's when they feed. It's a deliberate strategy, even if it's sometimes unconscious.
And who are their primary targets? Well, ironically, it's often the kindest, most empathetic people out there. People with a certain shine or a rich inner life are like a bright light for these emotional moths. Their capacity for empathy makes them a perfect source of the very energy that these individuals just don't have.
Okay, so we've identified the creature, we've recognized its bite. The most important question now is, how do you protect yourself? It's time to build our energy shield.
All right, here are 3 crucial steps. First, limit your contact. It's honestly the simplest and most effective way. Second, refuse to argue. They feed on your reaction, and trust me, you will never win, so just don't give them the satisfaction. And third, there's this really powerful technique called the gray rock method.
So what is the gray rock method? It's basically psychological camouflage. You make yourself as boring and as unresponsive as a plain old rock. Give short, uninteresting answers. Don't make a lot of eye contact. Don't offer up any emotional energy at all. If there's nothing for them to feed on, they'll be forced to go look somewhere else.
So, we've traced the psychic vampire all the way from a tragic gothic heroine to a modern office drone, and finally to a very real psychological dynamic. The real takeaway here is to take this knowledge and use it. Your energy is your most valuable, and it's a finite resource. So who in your world is draining it, and what are you going to do to protect it?